I will take you with me. You might learn something.
About soccer?
Nah, mate. Not about soccer. And for fuck's sake, stop saying soccer!
Yes, that is the outro from last time. Sturm Graz's unofficial victory anthem. The Graz Derby in the Austrian Cup ended 3-2 for Sturm, as you probably know already. After a tight and hard-fought game, not only on the pitch, by the way, Sturm fans attempted to steal parts of the GRK Tifo before the game. There was just a problem with that. They arrived too early, apparently, and stole some fan merch instead, which is not a particularly honorable alternative. GRK fans tried to invade the Sturm stand in return, and then there were some fights in the city after the game as well. I don't think anything there is particularly dramatic. There were not, for example, like some media wrote afterwards, little girls injured when the Sturm mob showed up at the merch stand. Not the case. But GRK needs to address how it does security and the separation of fans when it hosts derbies in the future. Sturm, the club, reacted by announcing that they wouldn't pass on tickets to their fans at the next derby, where GRK is the host. And the organized fan culture of Sturm is in a kind of a generational transition and should probably consider the vacuum of leadership and of organization that is currently there on its fringes. Without dwelling on any internal discussions, those are my 2 cents, I put a highlight video with English commentary in the show notes as well. Thanks to Sturm Graz for producing that. And while we're on the derby, I received a very nice voicemail from a listener, a Sturm fan from England, of all places.
Hey, hello. My name's Dan. I come from England. I've just listened to your podcast and was absolutely blown away because what you talk about is exactly what I have experienced with my son. So a few years ago, my son and I, he was 12 at the time, we came over to Austria, to Spielberg for the MotoGP. We stayed in Graz. On the Saturday, my son said, shall we go and watch a football game? Which we did. So we stumbled across Sturm and managed to get tickets. It was a game against Lask. Sturm lost. We were in Sector 12 of the North Curve. And oh my goodness me, it just blew our minds. So from that day forward, we have been over 5 times. We came over for the cup final in Klagenfurt, managed to get tickets. Came over for Salzburg a few weeks ago. We're coming over again in 3 weeks for the Lustenau game. We're going to Lisbon in December for the Europa League game. We've made so many friends and we have completely fallen in love with Sturm.
I loved hearing that. And Dan wrote me a longer version of this story too. And what was particularly wonderful to hear was that the Gruben Sturm Graz's old ground that he and his son visited on one occasion held the same magic for him than it did for me and my dad when I first started going. So that was wonderful. If you want to get in touch too, a voicemail is a great way to do it. It gives me great joy to hear from you. Just click at the link in the show notes. It's just 2 clicks and you can leave me a message that ends up in my email inbox and probably then hear your own voice on the air as well. Before we travel to Hamburg in Germany today, a little bit of housekeeping here on the podcast. The episodes so far this fall were an absolute delight to record and produce, and I hope you can feel that when you listen. And B, they reached a wider audience, sometimes much wider than almost any of the first season last year. So thank you so much. Please continue to spread the word online or in person to your friends who might also enjoy a higher altitude, intelligent view on soccer beyond the pitch. As you know, however, I am a professor of American history at a private university in real life, and grading season is upon me this late November and early December. So instead of a Christmas break, I might just take a break early, not drop an episode in 2 weeks, and then be back December 11th. So if you don't see a new episode in 2 weeks, it's an early Christmas break for me because of my work, and I'll be back December 11th. By the way, there will be either an episode on Poland, on Israel, or on the world of the Fantasy Premier League. Now, FC St. Pauli is a second German Bundesliga team from Hamburg. That's one thing. FC St. Pauli is also, and these are all quotes from a quick Google search, quote, Germany's original cult club, an anti-fascist club, the club of punk and techno, a swashbuckling left-wing club, Those are the labels. The history behind those labels dates back to the late 1980s, when punks occupied houses around St. Pauli Stadium in Hamburg, and anti-racists found out that football grounds were a place that belonged to them as well, not just to neo-Nazis. It continues today, that story, in a club that has most recently spoken out against the over-commercialization of football and as an ally to refugees. It continues in a fan culture that maintains close ties to the anti-fascist ultras of Israeli club Hapoel Tel Aviv, for example, and organizes anti-racist fundraiser tournament. The Fanladen St. Pauli connects the then and now. The Fanladen, and that literally means fan shop, but isn't really a shop. It's a fan-run and very uniquely social worker-led project with deep ties of accountability and advocacy to the club and its fan culture, and deep roots in the community, in the part of Hamburg that St. Pauli is from and plays at. So for this episode, I talked to Julian and Paul from the Fanladen. Without further ado, here is the St. Pauli story, through the lens of activist fans and knowledgeable social workers. Welcome, Julian. Welcome, Paul. And greetings to Hamburg. Thanks for taking the time. As usual, before we get into how St. Pauli's fan culture became what it is today, and what social workers have to do with football fan culture in general, could you tell us a little bit how you got into St. Pauli? What was your first game? And how did you get to do what you're doing right now for the club?
So I can start. My name is Julian, and I work at Fanladen St. Pauli for a little bit more than 4 years now. And so we have two pillars of our work. One is the SLO work, and one is the work as a social working fan project. And so my branch is fan project. And I came to St. Pauli in 1996 when I came to school. Beginning of school was a time where everyone had to choose a favorite football club. And Barbara, a co-worker of my father from the fan club Kanalratten, which means Kiel Channel Rats.
Rats, yeah.
Convinced me to become fan of St. Pauli. And as a kid, I liked the Skulls and Crossbones very much. And so while all the others became fans of Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, or HSV, I became a fan of St. Pauli. And in that year we relegated to second division, and my first match was a match against Mönchengladbach, which we lost 1-3 at Millerntor.
And you still stuck around?
I still stuck around, yes.
It's a lifetime decision, man.
Skull and Crossbones already in the picture then, and we'll get to how that came to be. The club you came to is a different one than the one that St. Pauli started as. Of course, we should also say you mentioned the Fanladen, which literally means fan shop. It is, of course, much more than a fan shop, and that's why I'm talking to you. And the goals go beyond selling stuff, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Paul.
Yeah, my name is Paul. I'm working for the Fanladen, I guess 3 years now, or 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure, because first coming into the job was due to the SLO in charge for disabled people, but then I get a bigger job at the Fanladen, so I'm around full time now. And how I became a St. Pauli supporter is quite easy to explain, because I grew up in the countryside of 100 kilometers away from Hamburg in the north, and there is it's the decision: are you progressive and looking forward, or a little bit more backwards, and if you go like a little bit more backwards, you go with the HSV. That is like back in the days, it was like that, and especially in the countryside and where I grew up, you can still see the people became St. Pauli fans as I did. They all moved out to Hamburg and to like bigger cities and like progress their life in a certain way. And like the guys, and I don't want to like claim that my way is better, but all the HSV supporters, they stayed in our hometown and they stayed like regional. It sounds mean, but I don't want to like judge them for their decision. But it's, with our neighborhood, it was like a decision how you want to progress your life, and like I choose to go with St. Pauli. Then back then worst football club I could decide for, I guess. But until then, I stuck with it, and so I'm around now, I guess.
And you're still in charge of questions of accessibility, abilities.
Yeah, and like sadly, I have a lot of other stuff to do, I guess. But like, it is a topic that we couldn't like. There's not enough room to build what you can do around the accessibility stuff, but not about the accessibility only, but about the like movement of thinking. Even at a club like St. Pauli, you have to like constantly talk about those kind of issues to like develop them in a certain way, and there's not that much time as needed as like to develop the idea of inclusion as I would love to develop it, I guess.
Right. So you're saying even at a progressive club, anti-fascist utopia hasn't been reached yet.
Yeah, no, yeah, of course,
no question.
Yeah.
You both of you mentioned the city rival in your opening statements already, so you should probably say something about what's going on there and what you referred as well. Hamburger SV, HSV, in short, now in the second league as well, is the bigger club, and it tended to be, if I understood Paul correctly there, and I don't know, Julian, if you agree, but the cultural question is if you watch football, but you don't just watch a game, you're also using football and the game and following a team as kind of having your world cracked open a little bit, as an avenue into politics, into activism. Then you lean St. Pauli. Back then, at least, when you all came to soccer, HSV is maybe the easier choice, maybe the choice of the masses. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so I think when we came to soccer, HSV was the easier choice. So it is often referred as being the club of the bourgeoisie in Hamburg. I don't really think it is. It is like it. So in one of the recent derbies in Hamburg, HSV had a stadium choreography. So we are Hamburg's working class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's correct at all, but it isn't wrong also, because I think especially, so Paul and me both are from Schleswig-Holstein, and I think especially in Schleswig-Holstein, so maybe it's a little bit of the hipster thing to go to FC St. Pauli. So I don't think that necessarily one of the Hamburg-based clubs is more or less working class, but I think both clubs will have working class people and bourgeois people in their fan base and the people visiting the stadium. But yeah, back then HSV was the easier choice. So in the middle of the 90s, they sometimes played international games, and so at the end of the 80s, they still have been German champion one time. So yeah, definitely was the easier choice.
Well, enough about them, I would say. We'll dive into St. Pauli and St. Pauli history a little bit.
Oh yeah, perfect timing, I guess.
What is that?
Perfect timing to be back with the coffee, I guess.
You're back on the right topic, yes. Yeah. That would take us probably around the middle 80s. Would you say that until the mid 80s, St. Pauli is not like a club like every other club, but it's a club that's deeply rooted in a part of the city. It's not particularly successful, but it also doesn't stick out in any particular way. It certainly isn't what it is today Am I being unfair, or is that the reality when the 80s roll around?
I think the reality is in the beginning of the 80s, nearly nobody cared of FC St. Pauli. So there were people going to the matches, but it has been a Hamburg-based club, part of the district of St. Pauli, and by chance a little more successful than maybe Altona 93 or SC Victoria are. Yeah, but I don't think...
It wasn't outstanding back then. It wasn't like that you have to go there, but you just visited it because of your parents or because you're around the area and like football, but not for any purpose, I guess.
And I think a lot of people went on Saturday to HSV and on Sunday to FC St. Pauli when it was possible.
Yeah. What changes then? What happens first of all, maybe what happens in St. Pauli, not the club, but the part of Hamburg during that time that influences the trajectory of where FC St. Pauli and its fans are headed?
So in the beginning of the 80s, a new social movement in Germany was evolving. So in German, they were called autonome, so like autonomous groups, evolving from the 68 students movement and from the K groups movement during the 70s.
Just for English-speaking listeners, what would the K groups be?
The K groups were after the Communist Party, KPD, was forbidden. There were probably not hundreds, but several groups claiming to be the ancestors of KPD, with slight ideological differences. It has been a very sectarian phenomenon.
How did they connect to the club, and why did it happen in St. Pauli as opposed to other parts of the city or other parts of Germany?
In St. Pauli, there were rotten houses at the harbor, and the so-called Hafenstraße, in English Harbor Street. And one of the action concepts of the autonomous movement was squatting houses. And so in the end of 1981, they first started squatting houses in the Harbor Street, and the big movement for cheaper rents and affordable housing grew in Hamburg. And at some point, people from Hafenstraße started to go to the Millerntor Stadium. And I think at the same time, so during the 80s, the local rival HSV had a problem with neo-Nazist hooligans in their fan scene. So there still are some, but also at HSV, anti-fascist groups are much more important than neo-Nazi groups right now, to have that clear. But back then, it wasn't like that. And so, some people going to HSV changed and started going to St. Pauli and met with the people from Hafenstraße. And so, there was a growing and anti-fascist fan scene.
And to point that out, it wasn't like that sexy to go to visit football matches and be a left-wing person. It wasn't like that. As normal as it is now with us, it wasn't that normal back then. It was like more or less you were looked at when you came back from football matches. So I got told that it wasn't that easy choice to visit football matches.
So you were looked at in your lefty subculture if you went to football, but you were also probably looked at on the football ground if you showed up as a visibly lefty person as well. So you have this coalition between disillusioned HSV fans who want an antidote to their own fascists on the terraces, and then you've got the squatter culture from Hafenstraße coming into St. Pauli's stadium as well. Do these find each other right away? Is something emerging there and something bubbling there right away? And what does the club say as well? All of a sudden we have this new audience, we have this new crowd coming into the stadium. What does this mix mean?
there has been a third faction in the beginning of the 90s, where still some racist or neo-Nazi fans have been in the northern stand of the stadium, and next to the stadium there's a mall. But back then, this mall was a house of Turkish and Kurdish people's clubs. So like all those migrant left-wing organizations met there. And at the beginning of the 90s, some active St. Pauli fans went over to those migrant center and told them, okay, we have a problem with racism still at FC St. Pauli. And so it was those three factions that sent the Nazis out of the stadium. And before, maybe a meeting point has been that the chair of FC St. Pauli in the late 80s wanted to establish a new stadium project called Milan. I think it was called Millerntor or St. Pauli Dome.
St. Pauli Dome.
And so a group of supporters met and campaigned against St. Pauli Dome. And out of this group, the first fanzine at FC St. Pauli was written, the Millerntor Raw.
So this is a fan-led magazine. But before we get there, I have two more questions. You said eventually Nazis were pushed out of the stadium. Could you be explicit about how that happened?
Yeah, I think we can be explicit because I think it's long enough ago that nobody has to fear
any charges
to get to court for that. I think they did it with fists.
Yeah.
They probably took quite a lot of fights for this, and this is easy to forget about, I guess, when you live in this kind of paradise anti-fascist world we live in right now, is that someone fought for this world, and you kind of still have to fight for it, even though it's quite okay around here now. But you kind of have to keep that in mind, that anti-fascism is like a thing to fight for, and it's not gonna just stay there, but you have to fight for it. As back in the 80s, the migrants together with the peoples from the district did.
Right. And the second question is, what is actually happening on the field back then? What league is St. Pauli in when all this goes down? And what is the situation around the club's football ambitions? How does that tie in?
So I think at the beginning of the 90s, that's embarrassing now.
Kind of.
At the beginning of the 90s, we promoted to Bundesliga. And it was at that time when private television started with soccer programs. And so the fanzine evolving at FC St. Pauli matched very good with marketing needs of private television selling football as a product.
And that's also like a part of our history, even though we don't like it, that the capitalist idea of private television helps us because they tried need stuff to sell, and they decided to sell our myth of the anti-fascist football club, and this is what helps us to become bigger, or as big as we are now, is that someone decided to talk about us in private media.
Yeah, there's 3 years in the Bundesliga there, around the turn of the decade, and a lot of yo-yo up and down in the meantime. You mentioned the Millerntor Roar, which is important, because it's fan-led. So it's not a top-down kind of soccer magazine. It's a grassroots-up soccer culture magazine. And it's a pioneer in its field. So, why don't we continue there, and you tell us a little bit about the sea change, what that is.
Yeah, so a group of fans associated around Millerntor Roar, was the same group of fans founding Fanladen back then. So in the beginning of 1991.
And Fanladen is already not. It's not a shop in a traditional sense, right? It's a project.
No, and we have to explain it several times a day.
Right. You should have given it a different name. Yeah.
But nobody knew then. So back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, left wingers tended to name everything Laden. Laden means shop. People started calling social centers Infoladen, information shop.
Kindergartens, Kinderladen, really famous back then, I guess.
And so the meeting point for fans became the Fanladen.
Now, did you or did you not also try to sell things back then that were shifting the image of the club?
Yeah,
not for profit, but there's a beginning of like fan-led merchandise culture a little bit, isn't there as well in there?
Yes, yeah. The club did not have a fan shop back then. They had some like balloon caps with German flags on it.
With German flags on it.
Nice. So it's a podcast. We don't need to show it. But, probably we will have one here. And so I think the most important thing about in the foundation of Fanladen was having a space as a evolving fan scene to self-organize. And then it was people had the idea to sell fan-made merchandise there.
And this do-it-yourself mentality in a way carries over from house squatting into this now. Not necessarily that the exact same people are involved, but you got to start with the grassroots and do things by yourself, right? That ethos is still there, no?
Yes. And at that time, someone found the skull and crossbones and took it to the stadium. I think the first skull and crossbones might have been a flag bought at a fun fair near the stadium, and then the skull and crossbones symbol was printed on merchandise like shirts and sweaters. So back in the 90s, it was still the same printer that does the shirts today.
Okay.
And some years later, but I don't know when exactly, FC St. Pauli bought the merchandise rights of Skull and Crossbone.
Oh, so the club eventually bought the rights from the fans.
Yes, bought the rights from the fans. So until today, we get a small amount of money from FC St. Pauli for the use of Skull and Crossbones.
All right. And the fan scene, the magazine, Millerntor War. That's where we initially started. Just loop us back there.
It was way before my time, so I can't talk about.
Yeah, it was way before my time also. So I read a few Millerntor Wars, and it's funny how some debates and how some left-wing debate changed. So in the Millerntor Roar and at the Fanladen at that time, you found a poster against people selling drugs in St. Pauli. And in Fanladen today, you will find a poster against the criminalization of Black people selling drugs in St. Pauli today. So it's funny to see, but I think the most important aspect of Millerntor Roar was that it was a root of self-organization, which was totally unknown at FC St. Pauli until that time.
Unknown, would you say, in German football as well?
Yes, probably unknown in German football as well. At least self-organization for non-destructive purposes.
Right.
I think hooligan groups they're
self-organized too.
Self-organized in some way, but for other purposes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Since then, St. Pauli has become a bit of a symbol, almost independent of how well it's doing on the pitch. How is the contact between club and its own fan culture? Would you say now this is the love affair is mutual, and you have fans who are leading the club's match day operations, or have there been moments of friction and conflict between the club and its activist fan culture as well?
Obviously, we have some some boards that the fan scene is not getting along well with, but like especially our new board is like quite accepted or really accepted in our fan scene. But
Yeah.
like the 2001, I wasn't in the fan scene, so I only heard a lot of stories about Conny Littmann, and the way he treated the club was not like as accepted in the fan scene overall, because he took like some tough decisions, I guess.
But
Yes,
by then the club is already embracing the image of like the skull and
Yeah.
bones flag, the slogan "non-established," and the name of
definitely. Yeah, right.
the club is already using that, though, right?
Yeah.
yeah. But until the late 2000 years, FC St. Pauli has always been nearly bankrupt. Yeah, because of bad economic decisions.
Yes, I think we can say that. Yeah.
Then Conny Littmann became president. He works in the theater and show business. He has been a gay rights activist back in the 80s. And he then became president of FC St. Pauli. But I think the one becoming president was not the gay rights activist Conny Littmann,
But the showmaster.
but the showmaster Conny Littmann. Yeah, he acted a little bit like King Louis. So he did not have a very democratic style to lead FC St. Pauli. And so the active fan scene did not like him. He created a very solid economic base for FC St. Pauli today. And he did it with unpopular decisions. And he did it in a style a little bit like a dictatorship, but he did it. I think you have to acknowledge that also.
And it was under his leadership that we did like the Retter shirt and the benefits games. It was mostly his idea, I guess.
And not at least the reconstruction of the stadium to a modern football stadium.
Yes, we should get to the stadium though, because you alluded briefly before the Sport Dome or the St. Pauli Dome, whatever it's called, their late 80s, 90s. That is now dead, and it's dead because of resistance of the fans, right?
Yes. So I was thinking about, do we need to explain to the audience what a club is?
A member-owned club.
Yes.
I hope there are people listening to this who haven't listened before. So maybe very quickly, we should say that St. Pauli is not a franchise in the American model, and it's not a corporation in the sense that British clubs are. But at the very least, 50% plus one vote have to be held by men. And this is a Germany-wide rule, and it has its loopholes and it has its problems. But we are talking about a significant role of voting members, we're fans, in the day-to-day decisions of the club, right?
Yes. And so if I call Conny Littmann a dictator, so a majority of members voted for him as president.
Right. And from when to when roughly are we talking about here in his presidency and then the stadium revamp?
From the beginning of the 2000s until 2010, when the club turned 100 years old. So it has been a second third division stadium. You had steel pipe stands. I don't know if you can translate a Stahlrohrtribüne to English quite accurate.
These are makeshift temporary bleachers that we're talking about. Yeah.
So if it rained, it was muddy. The southern stand and the northern stand did not have a roof. So it has been a football stadium. So you did not have a multifunctional stadium before, right. Also, but it was rotten, and so the administration buildings were in containers. The fan shop has been in a container,
like a container village, I guess. Around here, when you visit a match back then, there were a lot of containers standing around. And I mean, like, for me, as these were the first moments of visiting the football club,
right,
it has a lot of nostalgia with it. And especially talking to older people who were around, it has a lot of nostalgia with it. But as Yuan told, it is necessary to build new. And the reconstruction of the stadium was like founded like by the fan scene. So you could you can lend the club money for rebuilding the stadium.
Right. So fans helped fund the reconstruction.
Yeah.
And there has been a working group stadium reconstruction back then where fans were involved. In the end, I think it was at that time the most cooperative stadium construction between club and fans you could find.
What would you say, if I was to visit a St. Pauli home game today, what would you say I should look for that defines St. Pauli as a club that's different? How does the vibe, the atmosphere, and the architecture match who St. Pauli is as a club over against all these modern all-cedar arenas?
I guess what is like the first impression of the club when you visit it, it is the south stand where all the offices of the club were inside. It is like the south stand looking at it from the outside is kind of the same as the Hammerburg inside our logo, or the FC St. Pauli logo, and it's classic like brick wall Hamburg, like the old workers district. It's like brick wall, green roof. Our stadium is unique because it's like showing the character of the district and the mentality of like working class, I guess.
And it's an inner city stadium, which you nearly don't have in Germany. So you can maybe compare it to like Craven Cottage in Fulham or like that, which is a stadium.
Yeah, Munich, 1860 Munich Stadium, and older English stadiums. I mean, still the old Everton Stadium, for example, is still very much an inner city ground, but even England is moving very much away from that. Yeah, graffitis is what I would notice when I arrive on the ground.
Yeah, you might notice that.
Murals.
It's a highly discussed topic.
Yeah, definitely.
So because there are people who like to spray paint, and there are people like me who like the brick walls being brick walls, because we spend a lot of money for the outside of the stadium to be brick walls. The fan scene, mainly the council called Permanent Fan Council, Ständiger Fanausschuss, and club officials and spray painters discuss about which parts of the stadium are allowed to be spray painted, and which should remain brickstone. And there's a lot of graffiti outside the stadium and around the stadium, which is fan made.
But we have like artists, because there's the Millerntor gallery held by like Viva Con Agua and like in social organization connected to the club, and the Ständige Fanausschuss, the fan council, they have the right to decide which mural is spray painted outside the stadium.
Well, since we're on it already, Fanladen versus your day-to-day opinions, understand what is it? You referred earlier to two pillars of Fanladen and fan shops, social projects, work. What is it that Fanladen St. Pauli does on a day-to-day basis, especially those things that may not be familiar to fans of English or American clubs?
So back in the early 90s, there came on a concept in Germany called National Concept for Sports and Security, and it ruled out which actors are security partners in this concept. So like the clubs, the police, the railway organization, and as one pillar of a security concept, fan projects and social work were named. And so over the years, it became mandatory to get a professional football license for for clubs to have a fan project. Social working fan projects are paid usually to 50% by the DFL, German Football League, which is the organization of the German professional clubs in first and second division. Usually a quarter is paid by the federal state the club is based in, and a quarter is paid by the city the club is based in.
What is the object of these fan projects, social worker-led fan projects? It's a very peculiar German thing.
The typical situation is that, like, a member of the active fan scenes or of the active fan scene don't want to talk to the police. So in Germany, or I guess in all over Europe, the active fan scene hates the state and the police.
So I think maybe one of the most important aspects also is if you help fans creating their environment and participating in their own environment and getting a feeling of you have the power to change things in your everyday life around the club. I am not that motivated to destroy them, and I think this is like a working approach of violence prevention. So I think this is more important than every talk we have to fans, having fans participate. So I can tell them, oh, stop being violent. Maybe in some cases that might work, but I think the more important aspect in preventing violence is really to have the fans participate in building the club, the fan scene, the environment, and spaces around the club.
And like it is like to help them talk. Then they don't have to talk to the police. We gonna go to the police and talk to them and like try to moderate the idea of fans having the march through different cities and the wishes of the police to not have violence in the city. We are the ones to refer to and to like maybe come a little bit more together. And this is what stands out in my perspective.
Club officials always are very committed to the brand, and they pitch projects. And the police is very committed to have the streets secure and so to have all rules followed. Fan scene is very committed to self-presentation and do what they want. And I think sometimes it's necessary to have an understanding of the other parties involved in a professional football match and football club, and to simply translate languages and behaviors.
Right. So it's a mediating role. In a way, It's also an advocacy role. How do you, I mean, both of you come from the active fan culture. How do you make sure on a day-to-day basis that active fan scene trusts you? If you're in this go-between role, especially with police, is there any position that you've been in where you've been made to say, no, I won't give information about this, or I won't give information about that? In order to protect your contacts within the fan culture.
Yeah, that happens on a regular basis. So, which is quite necessary for police to do. So it's their job to gather information, and so they will ask us. It's our job not to help them gather this information because we depend on the trust of the fan scene. And so on a regular basis, we tell them, sorry, but we are not your spies, helpers, or anything. We can help you translate. We can give advices to the fan scene, and maybe they will do what we say. Maybe they won't, because they're free citizens of Germany and can do whatever they want as long as it's lawful, or as long as they do not get caught.
Yeah. I frame it this way.
And yes, so it happens quite often. Or the police officers call us and ask, "Oh, when do the ultras start their journey to an away game?"
Sorry.
Right. You can't help with that.
Usually the answer is, I don't know. But mainly because it's annoying to every time explain them what is the rule of social workers.
We are there to watch out for our fanzine, and if they get caught, we stand by and watch if everything is all right. And then most of the time, for me, I can say I'm a little bit over the top with the police guys, just like to annoy them more, like to be more annoyed with me than the one they had in custody. So the one in custody can be a little bit more calm.
Right. You're taking the heat away from them a little bit.
Yeah. At least I try. And this is what most of the time the fanzine values, I guess, that they know that we are around for the club, like maybe mostly 24/7, because I don't have any hobbies beside my job. That can't.
You forget some.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, but on the other hand, it's my dream job, so it's nice.
Right.
And it is like I'm from holiday. Like I got holidays the last 3 weeks, and I didn't do. No, I didn't.
You didn't know what to do.
No, I did do some football, but I didn't do as much football as I would have done in other holidays. So I'm quite good at getting new hobbies, I guess. I hope at least. But to come back to my topic, I guess the fanzine, they value our job and they kind of understand what we are doing, because we try to talk about what we are doing with them to point out why it is helpful to trust us.
Yeah, so we have had a recent case in Germany where our colleagues from Karlsruhe, were invited were loaded to a state attorney because they should tell something about
who did a certain
who did pyrotechnics in Karlsruhe, and they did not do, and so they had to pay 2 fines. And were threatened with custody to enforce.
Until they talk. Yeah. Until the social workers tell on whoever started the pyrotechnics. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's limited to 6 months in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. I probably would not go to jail because someone stole a tuna sandwich close to the highway.
Yeah.
Because probably them, the custody to enforce would be more grammatically than the penalty for stealing a sandwich.
Right. Has that happened at St. Pauli? Have you stolen tuna sandwiches?
No.
Don't steal.
No. Nobody ever steals at highway parking spots.
It's not a common spot around here.
I did have a slight tagging on to this, but also leading you to kind of the other end of the spectrum of what St. Pauli is now. We've been hearing you talk about your day-to-day work, the active fan culture that lives there, that is there, that may or may not have other hobbies other than St. Pauli. But then it's also fairly easy to buy yourself a T-shirt with these skulls and bones on there online, live somewhere far away from Hamburg, and declare yourself a rebellious St. Pauli fan. You see what I'm getting at? So the easy commercial access now to the vibe that St. Pauli is projecting. How do you, who are there on the ground, deal with that phenomenon and also what's in between? So international fan clubs that maybe show up for 1, 2, 3 games a year. What has that done to the community of St. Pauli, and how do you cope with the fact that in many ways the club has become a brand as well that's recognized worldwide?
Back in the days when the stadium wasn't reconstructed and Ultra St. Pauli still was standing in the Gegengrade stand, they had a leaflet for the Gegengrade, which was called Gegengrade, and they had a quote of a Hamburg-based punk band on it, which I tried to translate it to English. So the song was called T-shirts for 35 mark, which would be 17 euro. Or like probably $16, and it was a song about punk rock and music merchandising.
What is the quote in German? I can try to translate it.
The quote in German is: Sie machen alles zu Plastik. Was ist völlig egal? Sie nehmen Zorn, Wut und Rebellion und ab ins Regal.
They're taking anger, rebellion, and counterculture and putting it on shelves for sale at stores. So it's a commercialization of of anti-establishment feelings and of years of earned on the ground, earned activism, which is why it was so important, I think, that we told the story before of how do you get Nazis out of the stadium. You don't do it by selling shirts and by showing up.
No.
Yeah.
Probably I'm the person at the Fanladen team most annoyed from the brand FC St. Pauli because I really hate it. So we have a Kongstar ad outside.
This is your main sponsor, I should say.
It's our main sponsor, and it's a telecommunication branch of German Telecom. So it's like a daughter, like in America, a daughter of AT&T. And they act like they would be a diverse telecommunication company, and you will never read. We have a cell phone contract, and it costs 19.90, and you have like 13 gigabytes of data volume. But what they have outside is a very picturesque
Fight for peace.
Fight for peace, solidarity with Ukraine, with comic figures. So they say everything and nothing. So like when at a Miss World contest, world peace is wished. And I could get really angry about that concept of sponsoring and advertising, because I think the commercialization and...
But in a way, St. Pauli set itself up for it. I mean, this is what a sponsor gets. When you buy into St. Pauli, you get that kind of image, you get that kind of vibe, right?
Yes, you get that kind of vibe. But you get it without the radical sting that criticism out of the fan scene,
of course,
has had.
No, you get it prepackaged. You get it in custom-sized portions, prepackaged to push out to whoever you want your customers as a company to be. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but it's not about customers. I studied at a university nearby, and for me, as like long-time St. Pauli supporter, it was like I was really happy seeing someone with the St. Pauli like sweatshirt on, and then try to talk about him or her with like about the last corner or the last penalty we probably missed. It was like, nah, I'm not interested in, I don't care for football. It's like just I like the statement. And this, I mean, I'm now looking better on it professionally. It's kind of fair because they paid us like probably 15 euros or 50 euros for this sweatshirt. But back then it was like, yeah, but you're taking my like subculture, you've taken my identity to just show off because an Antifa flag is too tough or too tough for you.
What about the international dimension of this? I mean, St. Pauli now has fan clubs all over the world that, of course, aren't part of this story that unfolds on the Hafenstrasse in the 80s and 90s. How does contact with those fan clubs work like, and how do you view that phenomenon, the global reach?
Oh, it's very nice that we have fan clubs all around the world. Yeah. In some way, being a St. Pauli fan around the world is being a little naive. I sometimes compare to that might be unfair. But Benedict Anderson has a concept of long distance nationalism, where you have projections on a state or nation far away, but you're not involved to it on a regular day and everyday life. And so I don't want to compare because the love to St. Pauli has nothing to do with nationalism. But so there are people sitting like 10,000 kilometers away and have a very naive and a very romanticizing picture of what is really happening in St. Pauli. So they do not recognize there's violence around the stadium. They do not recognize, do not fully recognize there's also discrimination at St. Pauli. But it is, and also for German fans, St. Pauli is a projection. I think also for me, St. Pauli has aspects of being a wall to paint my pictures on. That is why I get angry when we talk about ads. But if you don't experience it on a daily basis, I think you will have another picture.
Yeah.
And that might be quite nice because people from away fan clubs often are very enthusiastic. And sometimes like they're St. Pauli fans from another time. And so it's really great to have them, but it's sometimes hard to explain that not everything is perfect here.
And it's quite interesting because some of my friends, one is from the US and the other is from Yorkshire. He is part of the Yorkshire fan club, and he decided to move to St. Pauli to be like nearer to the club. And I started knowing him when he was newly moved to Hamburg, but you can see a change with him because like he was still, when he was back in Yorkshire, he was still like more into the fan scene stuff. So he knew a little bit more about the ideas and the problems around, but still like him living here for like, I guess 2 or 3 years now, he changed in a way, like because he's more part of the, like he has St. Pauli in his day-to-day base now. And it's kind of, I mean, everyone wishes to be around here, but being around here is sometimes a little bit sad, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And especially this is interesting because to see this change with him, and not the US guy, because he moved to Germany because of St. Pauli, because he kind of knows St. Pauli through I don't know, through his family, I guess, I'm not sure. And he decided to move here without having a fan club back in the US. He moved here in the age of 18, and he's became since then an active member of the fan scene. So he's a little bit different to the friend from Yorkshire, who's like changed over the last 2 or 3 years in a good way, I guess, because as you told it, I like the enthusiasm you can see with the foreign fan clubs, but it's like you don't have to stick to your decision. You don't have to like fight for your decisions you made when you're an international fan club, because you don't get like in touch. You don't go to the Jolly Tresen on like a Thursday and have to discuss what you were talking about on the internet. Mm-hmm. It is like when you do it living around here, it's more or less like if you post some shit on the internet and then go to the Jolly, everyone came up to him and was like, Julian, what the fuck? What is wrong with you? Why did you do that?
This is an actual physical bar that you're talking about, where people get
the Jolly
face-to-face conversation versus just online fandom.
And you like would get more shit for what you do.
Yeah. By the way, Julian, thank you for being the first one on this podcast to quote Benedict Anderson, historian, political scientist. I thought you were going to say St. Pauli is an imagined community. Global imagined community as well. In a way.
And I think especially for foreigners, maybe it's not like a far distance relation, but in some kind more like a far distance crush.
Yeah. That's a good
far distance, long distance crush. Yeah.
Then you arrive here and recognize, my long distance crush
isn't quite as pretty as I thought.
Also, is waiting after sports.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's quite a nice image.
The other thing I wanted to ask you before we close is another question of global reach. So friendships with other fan groups, with other particularly with other anti-fascist fan cultures around Europe and the world. What are those contacts, and maybe quickly, how did they come about?
The older ones are still connected to clubs like Celtic Glasgow or Athletic Bilbao.
The early days of politicization of football, 80s, 90s, those are friendships that were forged back then, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes. While the more important groups today are not that strongly or not at all connected to clubs like that. So the ultras movement has a lot of connections to Italy, because they're very much inspired by Italian ultra style. So there are connections to some groups of Sampdoria Genua, to a group at Atalanta Bergamo, and to fans of Terni and Ternana culture.
Yeah.
So there are ultras friendships in Germany, mainly to Babelsberg, who plays third or fourth division. It changes sometimes.
Fourth now, yeah.
And to the group Schickeria and Collegio at Bayern Munich.
Yes.
Which also are anti-fascist or left-wing ultra groups.
We should say that these are all the groups that you're referring to share the anti-fascist consensus of, in this case, of Ultras St. Pauli, and that's a firm basis for these friendships.
And then there's Bremen in Germany. It's important as well because they're close. Like if you don't know about our friendship, you could think that they're rivals, but we have a close connection and close friendship with them, or our ultra scene, and especially on the professional base, I would guess the colleagues. There were jokes when we met on like bigger like DFL events that everyone is joking. St. Pauli and Bremen is sitting together. So,
and it's not only an ultras connection, but I think every important group in the St. Pauli fan scene sometimes hangs out with groups of people in Bremen, and at nearly every match, if Bremen doesn't play at the same time, people from Bremen will be in the southern stand of St. Pauli, which is because Bremen also has an anti-fascist fan scene, and because they also don't like HSV, and so it's the closest idea to be friends with them.
Hapoel Tel Aviv?
Yeah,
I can't tell how this friendship began, so I don't know. So there's a friendship to Ultras Inferno in Liège from mainly Ultras St. Pauli, but also from other people in the fan scene. And at some point, so there's an anti-racist tournament at St. Pauli every 2 years. On a regular base, fans from Hapoel Tel Aviv, from Ultras Hapoel, join the tournament. And so there's also a intense friendship between mainly fans from the southern stand at St. Pauli and fans from Hapoel Tel Aviv. And if you go to certain districts of Tel Aviv with a St. Pauli beanie or St. Pauli sweater, you will certainly be approached by people and asked if you know specific persons out of the St. Pauli fan scene. So I won't say a name, but it's like, do you know Peter?
Yeah.
And for sure, I know Peter. So I think it's also at the fan scene of Hapoel Tel Aviv a very commonly shared friendship.
And now before this season, we got a friendly with them. They visit us for preseason, and I mean the club was stressed out by it because they
for
are
security reasons.
But no, because they're not used to like the fan culture around like house in Europe. I guess they were surprised, but it was really nice. The day in the district and especially the party afterwards was really amazing because not only the fan scene, but a lot of club officials joined the party afterwards. So it is a big friendship, and for me it was a nice game because I like the southern like fan culture and pyros and stuff. But
and Hapoel Tel Aviv, of course, also a committed anti-fascist.
Yeah, definitely.
Group.
And so fans of Hapoel Tel Aviv and of Sagnin, Israel-based Arab football club, hosted the anti-Arab tournament in
2006.
I think in 2000.
Oh yeah, right.
I think later. I think 2011.
Yeah, 2011.
So they hosted it in a kibbutz near Tel Aviv, and Celtic fans from Green Brigade decided not to enter the colonial settler state of Israel. So in think about the colonial settler state in German with an Anführungszeichen.
Yes, you want to put the colonial settler definition in quotation marks here.
Yes,
this is Celtic's. Yeah, this is Celtic's issue. But you did go. This is a cooperation between Hapoel Tel Aviv and Bnei Sachin, which is an Arab club that plays in the Israeli league system as well. Yeah.
Yes, and so every other fan scene who has went to anti-war tournaments before or was engaged in the Alata network of anti-fascist fans in Europe went to that tournament. So if they were able to afford it, but the Green Brigade of Celtic did not go there. And I think this has been the end of the contacts between Celtic and the younger fans of St. Pauli, because a younger fan generation of St. Pauli had the opinion that this is discriminatory behavior. And so I think, especially in the connection to Celtic Glasgow, there's a big generational gap in the St. Pauli fan scene.
Because to you, the anti-fascist consensus of being fans clearly extends to what Hapoel Tel Aviv is doing, or Bnei Sachin is doing as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if we could look ahead, let's say 10 years, and we'll assume you're not quite gray-haired yet, but you're still working at the Fanladen. What kind of St. Pauli fan culture do you envision 10 years from now? What would it take for you to say, these have been 10 good years for the club and for its fans?
That is actually a great question.
I think people getting older and having making images what young people should do during the next 10 years tend to get very frustrated and angry old people. So I hope it's possible to transfer experiences and values to a younger generation, but not to judge it too much.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea to have the identity without having sharing the identity, because younger generation has to change their environment to have an influence, to feel at home. You have to be able to change it, but not to change the ideology around the club. Yeah, Yeah, right. And not but to embrace it for themselves, and not I don't care for how they do it as long as they do it. Hopefully there will be a lot of young fans around. And
and my personal dream, so we're still a club in 10 years. We promoted to first division
and Champions League.
A member-owned club, you mean, right?
A member-owned club. Mm-hmm. We promoted to first division in one of these years. Russia stopped its war on Ukraine, and I will be possible to visit an international game in Novosibirsk by Transsib Railway.
That's a grand vision. Yeah.
That would be great.
That is a grand vision 10 years from now. We'll check in, see if it happened. Wonderful.
I hope it's going to happen. We're going to play Champions League.
In Novosibirsk.
Yes.
Yeah, EuroLeague is fine also.
Yeah, right.
But I want to have this 6 days travel to an away game.
Right. Well, as a fan of clubs that have played European League and Conference League, I much prefer those to the Champions League in terms of the vibe. Thank you so much for the time. This was fun, and I do hope it also holds some inspiration for fans in other countries who don't live in this German context, but still could glean some kind of wisdom from your approach to grassroots-led fan work, to social work among fan cultures, and to self-organization among fans. Thanks a lot for taking the time, and all the best to you, and greetings to St. Pauli, and may the promotion to Bundesliga happen this year.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Be well.
Ich kann's nicht mehr sehen. Ich will nichts mehr hören. Ich möchte mich in die Ecke verkriechen, aber hilft nicht. Ich könnte den ganzen Tag nur noch schreien, aber nein. Da hilft nichts auf der Welt. Wenn dir St. Pauli auf den Geist fällt.
I know if you don't understand German, you're not going to understand the lyrics to this, but it's just such a hauntingly beautiful St. Pauli song. It's by the Hamburg-based band Die Sterne, the stars, and the title in English is If St. Pauli is Falling on Your Nerves. The video is linked in the show notes. It was actually done in the old Millerntor Stadium before the renovation. As I've said at the beginning, I may not be back with you in 2 weeks. And if that is so, then it's because I have a lot of grading to do for my students here. But I will be back then December 11th with an episode either on fan cultures in Poland or fan culture in Israel, or an episode on a phenomenon that is the Fantasy Premier League. We'll see. I have yet to decide. Until then, I hope you're starting your Advent well. Be well.
Aber hilft nicht. Ich könnte den ganzen Tag nur noch schreien, aber nein. Da hilft nichts auf der Welt. Wenn dir St. Pauli auf den Geist fällt. Wenn dir St. Pauli auf den Geist fällt. Ich möchte mich in die Ecke verkriechen, aber hilft nicht. Ich könnte den ganzen Tag nur noch schreien, aber nein. Da hilft nichts auf der Welt. Wenn dir St. Pauli